From getting shot by rivals to attacking bailiffs,
Ball disarmed one of the deputies and shot one of them in the leg.
these convicts weren't given a death sentence, but what they got up to in court is about to seal their fate. Disclaimer. Number 1. Jitendra Goji. This guy's about to learn the hard way that what goes around comes around. Goji was facing a whole list of charges, including 19 counts of murder and extortion. Goji was an Indian gangster and leader of the feared Goji gang, but Goji was up to much more than starting fights on school property, carjackings, and gang wars. He was also linked to many murders. Famous folk singer Harshita Dahiya, who witnessed one of his murders, a political party leader, rival gang members, a school teacher, and many gang wars, leaving bystanders dead. The law had caught up with this criminal 3 times, but each time Goji managed to escape police custody. He was soon at the top of the list of Delhi's most wanted gangsters. Thanks to an $8,000 reward, the police got him once again. Then they put their guard down since they finally caught him and had the evidence, but that was a fatal mistake. On 24 September 2021, Goji was brought into the Rohini District Court in New Delhi for a hearing of one of his criminal cases. Not long after, 2 men who looked like lawyers walked into the courtroom, but they weren't lawyers, and they weren't there to help him break out either. A rival gang had hired them to take out Goji once and for all. Minutes after they entered, they whipped out guns and opened fire. The police hurried to the room and exchanged fire with the gangsters. In the aftermath, 3 gangsters lay dead, a gory end to a dangerous man. Speaking of dangerous men, wait till you hear what this guy did to a judge in court. But before we get to that, number 2, Laron Anthony Ball. As far as criminals go, Laron Ball's not the sharpest knife in the drawer, but that didn't make him any less dangerous. Ball was facing charges of felony murder and 2 counts of armed robbery. On the night of December 27, 2001, Laron Ball shot and killed 27-year-old Ammon Rogers before making off with the man's Rolex. The same watch helped investigators pin him with the crime when they caught up with him. Ball was held at Milwaukee County Jail. As he waited for trial, he started to plot an escape. He planned to switch identification wristbands with a prisoner set to be released, but he blabbed too much and an informant told the deputies. Ball was moved into solitary confinement. With his first plan thwarted, Ball started plotting something more sinister. But the police were up to his tricks, and when the trial began, Ball was brought into the courtroom wearing a stun belt, handcuffs, and shackles. But when the verdict came back on May 29, 2002, for some reason, Ball was brought into the courtroom without the stun belt, handcuffs, or shackles. The jury read out the verdict. Ball was found guilty. Suddenly, pandemonium broke out. Ball had run across the room, jumping into the jury box and thrown himself through the window, or trying to. Unfortunately for him, the windows remained unbroken, sealing him in. Members of the jury scattered in panic as 2 deputies tackled him to the ground, but Ball grabbed, got a hold of one of their guns, and shot twice, hitting one deputy in the leg. The other bailiff grabbed the slide of the semi-automatic pistol, keeping Ball from firing again while also trying desperately to keep his hold of Ball. Alfonso Morales, the lead detective on the case, was in court to hear the verdict.
I have to act now, or we're going to end up losing this.
He jumped onto the prosecution table and fired several shots at Ball. Ball wasn't supposed to get the death sentence, but he certainly signed up for it by the stunt he pulled. This wasn't the first time a quick-thinking detective saved someone's life in the courtroom. One time, the person being attacked was actually the judge. Number 3, David Paradiso. Any man who can do what this guy did to his mom will certainly not be missed. Paradiso was charged with first-degree murder and kidnapping. In 2006, Paradiso's mother was driving her son and his girlfriend, 21-year-old Eileen Pelt. The two had been dating for all of 2 weeks. There were no arguments, no shouts, just the soft hum of the engine. Suddenly, a scream tore through the car and she watched in horror as her son stabbed Pelt. Then he forced his mom to drive out of town to dump her body. He was later arrested after a high-speed chase. The trial began in Judge Cinda Fox's Stockton courtroom. The defense argued that Paradiso was on drugs when he killed Pelt. Paradiso took the stand and said he murdered Pelt and thought she would kill him. But the second day when he took the stand, his story changed. Paradiso said he killed her because she deserved to die. Then he went into disgusting details that stunned the courtroom.
His response to the questions was totally out of left field, 180-degree left field. Like, he started making sexual connotations about the individual, the girl he had murdered, and he also started making statements that she deserved to die, and then the courtroom became so disruptive.
Pelt's family was visibly upset and stormed out of the courtroom. Paradiso's mother stood up and yelled that her son should not have been on the stand. This fracas made Judge Fox decide to call for a recess. The jurors were filing out when Paradiso stood up at the witness stand. Both the bailiff and his attorney yelled at him to sit.
He was told on 2 occasions, sit down, by a deputy. I then yelled at him, sit down.
Instead, Paradiso backed up against the wall behind the witness chair, pulled something out of his pocket, and lunged at the judge, lifted her to the bench, and started striking the judge with it. Everyone rushed to help her, but Detective Eric Bradley stopped the chaos, firing at Paradiso 3 times. As for the judge, she was carried out on a stretcher and had bandages on one arm, but she was talking and smiling. Stopping a convict from attacking someone is one thing, but sometimes the person they want dead is closer than anyone thinks. Number 4. Michael Marin. If there's one person you wouldn't expect to see on a list like this, it's this guy. And what he did in court was equally shocking. Michael Marin was charged with arson of an occupied structure. On June 28, 2012, Marin's son received an email from his father informing him how to handle his affairs if things went wrong in court and where to find his car. Nothing crazy about that on a typical day, right? Except Michael had been pronounced dead hours earlier. So who sent the email? What was in the car? But we're getting ahead of ourselves. The story of Michael Marin started decades earlier. Marin was a Yale-educated lawyer who amassed a fortune trading on Wall Street. He led a lavish lifestyle and was known for his expensive taste, collecting Picasso sketches, driving a Rolls-Royce, flying his very expensive plane, and a 6,600 square foot, $2.55 million mansion to boot. In July 2009, Marin's mansion lit up in flames, and that was not the most astonishing thing that happened that day. It was Marin telling the news crew how he managed to climb out the window wearing a scuba tank and using a rope ladder. If you think that was a strange thing to slip into when your house is burning, you're not the only one. The fire officials and arson investigators were suspicious as well. In addition, Marin's prized possessions, 18 etchings by Pablo Picasso, were all out of the house and in a safe. But why would this millionaire burn down his home? It all came down to money. Marin's fortune had dwindled and he couldn't keep up with his mortgage. He had $42,700 in his account and $50 in his 401k. A plan to raffle his house through a charity fundraiser had failed, so Marin turned to arson, hoping for an insurance payout. 53-year-old Marin was arrested and charged. On June 28, 2012, he was found guilty. He would face between 7 to 21 years in prison, but Marin chose a faster way out. Upon hearing his verdict, a seemingly distraught Marin buried his face in his hands and his face turned red. Then he took a swig from a drink in his bag and swallowed again. Minutes later, his defense attorney was helping him wipe his face. Seconds later, he convulsed and collapsed. A heart attack? What nobody saw was Marin had taken a cyanide pill. Paramedics arrived and started administering chest pressure. Minutes later, they wheeled Marin out of the courtroom on a stretcher. The former millionaire was dead. In his car, police found a can of cyanide he'd brought along before the trial. A dramatic end for a dramatic life. You might think that convicts need to take something to meet their end, but some convicts are ready to do anything to get away from serving time. This is Jason Binkowitz. He seems to have a personal vendetta against Thanksgiving. Binkowitz was charged with 2 counts of felony assault and 1 count of attempted murder. During Thanksgiving 2015, while family and friends bonded over turkey and mashed potatoes, a drunk Binkowitz stumbled to a Newtown home in Ohio and shot the homeowner in the head and chest. Thankfully, in the spirit of Thanksgiving, he survived. Binkowitz was later arrested and charged. Binkowitz was offered a 5-year plea deal, but he turned it down. He pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity, but in court, Binkowitz claimed that he was at the house to buy drugs when he fired in self-defense. The stories didn't add up, and it was no surprise that Binkowitz was found guilty. The judge spoke about his extensive criminal history before sentencing him to 13 years. But Binkowitz had a plan, and his ankles, which hadn't been shackled because they were so swollen, would help him. As the 42-year-old was being escorted out of the courtroom by a deputy, he ran away. The deputy followed after him, but only managed to get a grip of Binkowitz's prison shirt before he threw himself over the building's 3rd-floor banister. Screams filled the courtroom as emergency responders rushed to the scene, but it was too late. A 100-foot fall is not something you could easily walk away from, and for Jason Binkowitz, there would be no walking at all.